So definitely we're shifting into a much warmer climate state, and it's happening very quickly. Like I say, it's happening now. I mean, don't worry so much about the models of what happens in 2100 or even 2050, right? We're getting an abrupt change situation now. Now, how will this impact humans? How will this impact society? The biggest impact will be through the food supply. We've already seen problems with, starting with some of the food issues. For example, in March of 2012, March of this year, we had a massive heat wave throughout North America, super warm. And then in April, we had some killing frost. So, when it was really warm, the buds all came out for like apples and strawberries and, well, everything else. But in Ontario, apples and strawberries, and those buds were killed by the killing frost. So Ontario lost 88% of its apple crop, for example, this year. The drought in the U.S. Has been very, very severe, and widespread over large areas, and it's affected the grains, it's affected, rice, it's affected soybeans, and it's ongoing, it's continuing. I mean, the winter wheat crop is not doing very well because this drought is ongoing, and I've mentioned the Mississippi. So there's going to be huge economic impacts. In fact, they're already starting. The UN has issued a warning that we could have global food shortages in 2013. There's a group with the acronym DAHA, and they've made a forecast that right now the global GDP is taking a hit of about 1.6% because of climate change, either direct or indirect effects. And this same group says that up to 400,000 people are the mortality rate is higher globally by about 400,000 people, directly or indirectly related to climate change effects. And of course, these numbers, they're projecting 2.6% GDP hit. I think it was in about 10, 15 years, and also much higher mortality. Everywhere you look, things, globally, things are being affected by climate change. The die-off of boreal forests from the pine beetle, massive effects. And most people are aware now that the pine beetle, it's not killed off by cold winters. So before, it was around, but it would be killed off each winter. So the numbers of the pine beetle were kept down. But because they survive from one year to the next, there's a lot more of them. Emerald ash borer is another big issue. There was just a report saying that a lot of the largest trees on the planet are suffering. They're in danger. Their health is suffering. In the Amazon rainforest, in 2010, we had a drought. It killed about 3 or 4 billion trees. Same thing in 2010. The Amazon rainforest is a big sink for carbon dioxide, and in those 2 years, it became a source of carbon dioxide. The drought in Texas, it was worse in Texas in 2011 than just about anywhere else. It was way off the charts. If you plot a chart of humidity, of rainfall and temperature, most things follow along this line, and the data for 2011 was completely off the charts. We had about 4 billion trees dying in Texas as a result of that. So, we're talking about massive changes to our ecosystem. Animals are migrating, so there's a general poleward migration of most animals. Because they're used to a certain temperature range, and it's too hot where they are, so they have to move further north or south away from the equator to reach the temperature range that they're used to. So there's massive changes underway, and these changes are only going to accelerate. For example, people talk about the drought in the U.S. as if, it's going to end next year, it'll end any time. But, this climate models show that such droughts could become permanent features. It could last for 20, 30 years, could become a permanent feature of that area, that breadbasket area of the U.S. And it's not just drought that has a negative effect on food growth, but it's also flooding does. I mean, a lot of Europe and Britain and places, they've had an excess of rain in their most fertile crop areas, and their yields are typically much, much higher. The amount of the amount of grains that they get per hectare are tons of food per hectare. They're in the double digits in some cases. In most of North America, the food yields are much lower. So they're being, their yields are dropping because it's been too wet. So so basically, we're getting all of these massive changes today. We need to talk about them now. We need to start dealing with them now. The world basically has a choice. We do nothing, and we're going to be paying for that very quickly, and we're paying for it now. I think just today, NOAA had a report out on the $1 billion plus disasters that have occurred, the top 10 or 11 in the U.S., and they're extremely significant. And the insurance companies and reinsurance companies are very well aware of what they're paying out and the premiums they charge, and so on. So their profit margin, their model, their whole economic model for existing as a company has to change. And how it's changing is for example, in a lot of coastal areas in Florida, you can't get insurance now. I mean, they're just taking away their insurance coverage of some of the higher risk areas to deal with this. So so these changes are happening today, and they're very significant. And if methane does indeed start accelerating, it is accelerating. There's more and more of it coming up. If it in the past, there's been cases where methane has come up almost very abruptly, very abruptly from the ocean floor, or also from permafrost and things, and it will change the climate. So in the paleo records, the average temperature of the globe has increased, as much as 6 to 8 degrees in a decade or two sort of time frame. So this is a very fast, very abrupt change, and the signs indicate to me that we could be having such a state occurring now. So if we do nothing, we're certainly going to continue heading there.